Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Awesome. Okay, so this is Phillip and I'm Cyrus, and this is our current meeting right now. Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys.
We have our teacher, Mr. Christie, too. Um, so yeah, we wanted to have you as a mentor just to kind of give us sort of like a rundown of how you kind of got into this profession. If you kind of want to detail like what got you into this field.
Yeah, so if I share my screen, will you guys be able to see it?
I see some.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, that's in our lab. It's super loud during lunch. Okay, so I'm just going to share with you something really quick. Okay, so are you guys able to see my screen?
Yep, all good.
Okay, awesome. So for me, I actually started so I went to USC. And so when I was at USC, I was contemplating, whether I wanted to go to medical school or whether I wanted to go into the biomedical engineering field. And for me, I was really, trying to figure out what would be the best path for me. And so during college, I studied biomedical engineering because it gave me the option to go to medical school or to go straight into industry. Um, and so with that in mind, during school, I took all of the appropriate classes and I was able to get some internships and figure out what I wanted to do. But during that time, I was really focused on, what do I see myself doing in my career? And at that time, I really wanted to do something that was going to impact the world and to help patients. So while I was in college, sorry, hold on a second, I can go back into our lab. While I was in college, I had an internship at a big medical device company. So Medtronic is one of the biggest companies in the medical device industry. They do all sorts of medical devices, and I was actually working in their cardiovascular division. So I was in R&D, and I was an intern, and I was working in their cardiovascular division, and that was really my first introduction into the actual industry field of medical devices. And so I got to do hands-on work in the lab, and I got to build things. I got to use SolidWorks, which is a 3D modeling program, and I got to really see what it would be like to work as an engineer day to day at an engineering company. But at that point, I still wasn't totally sold whether or not I wanted to go into industry or whether or not I wanted to be a doctor. And so I shadowed some doctors. I still, I did my engineering classes. But it wasn't really until I graduated that I really decided what I wanted to do. So when I graduated, my first job out of school was at a company called Beckman Coulter. So it's actually very close to you guys. It's in Brea. And I was working in their diagnostics division. And so if you've ever had a blood test at a place like Quest Diagnostics, Beckman Coulter makes the big instruments that run those blood tests. And so I was working as a mechanical engineer after graduation, basically designing parts, working with manufacturing engineers and getting those parts into the production line, and really getting my first taste of what it would be like to be a full-time engineer. And at that point, that's when I decided that was really what I wanted to do with my career, because I loved the problem-solving aspect of engineering. I loved being on a team, and I loved being able to do something that was going to make an impact on patients. And then after working at Beckman Coulter for about 3.5 years, I made the jump into the implantable device space. So this was always something that I had been interested in. I really wanted to do something that was a little bit more directly impactful on the patient. And so I worked at Edwards Life Sciences, which is right here in Orange County in Irvine. And I designed a replacement heart valve, and basically took it all the way from concept, where basically we designed, did all the testing, and then took it all the way into the clinic, where I basically was in the operating room with physicians implanting the device. You can actually see the picture of me here in the operating room getting ready to implant the device with the doctors. Can only see what? Oh, okay, sorry. Can you see it now? Okay, great. So I'll put it here. So after being at Edwards for about 5 years, I moved over to a startup company called Servite Medical Technologies, and that's where I am right now. And so now I'm working on a new implantable device to treat heart failure. And so I'm leading the design of the implant and the delivery system. So it's back into the early stage development, and hopefully getting it to first in human, where we'll implant our device into a person in a couple of years. So this is kind of my career journey. I always had wanted to do something that was going to help people. And so, I studied biomedical engineering in school, and then I was able to get some internships and different jobs to help me get to where I am today. So that's kind of the overall career journey. I can go into the different types of jobs that I've had and kind of what I've done. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Any questions you have right now? Come over here. So for your heart valves and stuff like that, how does that use for you?
How does that what?
How does it use when you make working on your work?
Yeah. So when I was at Edwards, I designed a replacement heart valve that would be delivered without open heart surgery. So we basically spent, a couple of years designing and iterating in the lab, and so you can see here, the valve actually gets delivered into the left side of the heart, and so each valve is hand sewn by a human being. And so, you do a lot of testing in the lab, and then you actually do testing in animals to make sure that you're safe to go into the human experience. And, so that takes several years, and then you have to do a bunch of testing to make sure that you're compliant with the FDA regulations. So the FDA is the regulatory body in the United States that makes sure that everything is safe for human use. But this is actually the valve that I designed. It's called a dose, and we actually put it into over 60 patients. And so this is what I designed. It has a metal frame, and it has cloth, and it has tissue leaflets. And so you can actually, you basically can crimp it into a tiny little tube. So it basically gets delivered into a person via this delivery system. So it basically looks like a long fishing pole. So this valve is about this big. It's about tiny tube, which is basically about this big. And basically you go in through the femoral vein in the leg, and you go up where this blue line is, up through what's called the inferior vena cava, and then you go up into your right atrium, and then you cross the septum of the heart, and you go into the left atrium. So you basically have to be able to have a lot of flexibility in the maneuverability of this delivery system to be able to bend and deliver the device in the right location. And so you can actually see here, this is actually a real case in a real person. So you can see this is one of the doctors that we worked with. And so you can see here's the delivery system being inserted to the person's body. And so basically, you figure out which patients you want to implant it in. And here's actually a real CT image, which is a computed tomography. So basically, you get this image to determine if the patient is suitable. And then you do the whole procedure without actually opening up the patient's chest. So basically, the entire thing is done via imaging. So it's done via what's called echocardiography, which is basically ultrasound of the heart, and then fluoroscopy, which is basically live X-ray of the heart. And so this is actually a clip of a procedure that we did. So you can see here, this is actually can you see the video playing? You can actually see here, this is the heart, and the delivery system is this like long straight shaft, and the valve is coming out here. And so you can see here on the right hand side, here's the delivery system, and here are those anchors of the valve. So you can see that this is actually being deployed in the patient's body without ever opening them up. And so you have the fine maneuverability using the knobs on the handle of the delivery system. And then eventually you're able to fully deploy the device in the patient's body, and you're able to remove the delivery system and leave them with a brand new heart valve that's fully functional. And so this takes a whole team of people. I'm actually right here in this image with the doctors, basically during the procedure, advising them how to implant the device.
Going straight through the vein.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you. Any other questions? I sort of have a question. So what's like the process from going from like blueprints to actually implanting in the actual patient? Like what's the in-between process? And then go straight into testing it on humans.
Yeah, so there's, when you're developing an implantable device, first you kind of identify the unmet clinical needs. So what problems do you want to solve, right? Then you do a bunch of literature and patent research because you want to know what else is already out there, so that you're not infringing on somebody else's technology, because you'll have to eventually patent your technology to protect the intellectual property. And then you'll want to, you'll have to eventually get funding, right, to fund your project. So you'll have to come up with some sort of strategic vision. And then, of course, the engineering problem solving. So you'll have to come up with prototypes. You'll have to build and test in the lab to prove out the technology. And then you'll have to do a lot of bench testing, animal testing, and a long-term durability testing to prove out that your design can be implanted into a person for an extended period of time. And then all of that testing will have to be done to the standards that are, required for each country's regulatory bodies. So every country has their own regulatory body. In the United States, it's the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and so you have to make sure that all of your testing meets those requirements, and then you can submit all of that to the FDA. FDA, and then they can approve for an early clinical trial. And then you do a clinical trial, and then if all of those results look good, then you can get approval for human use.
Any other questions from Mr. BC? Okay. Yeah, Mr. BC, question. Well, we were wondering, like, what's sort of the time frame of all of that? Going from.
And what is it U.S. compared to?
Right, yeah. I guess two questions. So, what's like the time span of that? And also, like, how is the FDA kind of compared to other country standards?
So the FDA is pretty strict, but the time span, it depends on what kind of device, and the extent of the testing that's required. Typically, so like for the heart valve that I designed, it took about 4 years of development before we got to first human. I'm designing a heart failure device now, and because I'm in a startup environment, we can go a little bit faster than at my company. So I think it's going to be more like 2 to 3 years before we get to first in human. But getting to a clinical trial is only the first step to get to commercialization, where it's available to the whole public. That takes many, many, many years, like 10 years plus.
Thank you so much. I'll get a picture in front of the TV, just with you.
Yeah, get up there. All you guys get up there to take a picture.
Sure.
Oh wow, look, Cyrus, come up.
Let's go. If you're in it, let's go. Let's go. We got time. We gotta go.
DJ, hurry up, bro.
Push it a little bit more. Get like underneath that TV a little bit more. Okay, ready? 1. No. Push it. Josh, I can't see you. Wait, I shut the door because there's a big glare. Kyle. Thank you. Okay, ready? 1, 2. I'm gonna try and do one more this way. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you. Very informative.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Information.